Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Leeson here, today's top stories. The British department store Debenhams will shut its last stores this week after more than 200 years of trading. Prime Minister Boris Johnson promises to have a full inquiry into his government's handling of the pandemic. And the UK economy is picking up. That's according to figures from March. An end of an era for Debenhams. Once the biggest department store in the UK, the chain will close all of its high street stores for the last time this week. Here's NTD's Jane Well with more.
Debenhams' time on the high street is coming to an end after 242 years. All of its stores will shut this week. Fashion retailer Boohoo bought Debenhams for £55 million in January. It bought the brand, but not the shops. It meant 118 remaining Debenhams stores and its workers had to go.
The closure of Debenhams' physical stores, including this flagship store in London, means that 12,000 people will lose their jobs. Pandemic shutdowns proved too much for the already struggling retailer.
Debenhams has been a weak business for many, many years. The clock has been ticking for an awful long time. Meanwhile, some other department stores have done much better, have invested more in the infrastructure of their businesses, in the shopping experience, in the quality of the product, and they have fared better, albeit still had to face a hit from the pandemic.
In a similar shift, online retailer ASOS bought the Topshop and Miss Selfridge brands in February, but didn't want their physical stores. A sense of sadness on the street, but a feeling that it was inevitable.
I think it's quite sad. It's quite sort of, at the moment, everything's very empty and desolate. I think it'll be an opportunity to maybe look at retail buildings and offices and stuff and change the way we live.
I think it's a shame, but I think the pandemic has just accelerated what was happening anyway, that people's shopping habits are becoming more convenient to the individual rather than convenient to the shop owner, and things have to move in that direction. And if you lag behind and hope things are going to move backwards, you're going to lose out.
It didn't really affect me too much because I wasn't really the person that would go to Debenhams. I wasn't really the person experiencing the Debenhams experience, saying that way. But I think that being so present in so many high streets, I think it affected everyone.
While Debenhams will disappear from the high street, it will still continue online. But town planners will be wondering what's next for the empty stores. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
The COVID-19 pandemic has cost the UK hundreds of billions of pounds and over 120,000 deaths. The Prime Minister has promised to have an independent public inquiry next spring.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson promises a full public inquiry with statutory powers into the government's handling of the pandemic.
I can confirm today that the government will establish an independent public inquiry on a statutory basis with full powers under the Inquiries Act of 2005, including the ability to compel the production of all relevant materials and take oral evidence in public under oath.
The Prime Minister tells MPs the inquiry will begin in spring 2022 and the government will consult the devolved administrations before finalising the scope and detailed arrangements.
This process will place the state's actions under the microscope, and we should be mindful of the scale of that undertaking and the resources required to do it properly.
The Prime Minister says a commission on COVID commemoration will be established and he supports plans for a memorial.
Like many across this chamber, I was deeply moved when I visited the COVID memorial wall opposite Parliament. And I wholeheartedly support the plan for a memorial in St Paul's Cathedral, which will provide a fitting place of reflection in the heart of our capital.
Campaign group COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice says an inquiry must begin this summer. The Prime Minister may feel he can wait for answers, but bereaved families certainly can't.
Chief of the UK's largest police force says she rejected the idea of an all-female police team for the Sarah Everard Vigil. She said it was unpopular among both male and female officers and was also not practical.
The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick, says she considered creating an all-female police team to monitor the Sarah Everard Vigil back in March, but she scrapped the idea after consulting the officers. Speaking to MPs of the Home Office Affairs Select Committee, Dick said she had thought to send an all-female respond team, but had given up on the idea after finding it was highly divisive.
And I've subsequently taken a straw poll, and men and women alike are really not keen on this idea that when you have a primarily female rally or protest, that we will send only women in.
33-year-old Everard was allegedly murdered by a serving Met officer. On March 13th, around 1,500 people attended the Clapham Common Vigil at its peak, and most of them were female. Dick says some have suggested the handling of the vigil would have been better with an all-female support unit.
It was considered, it was not practical, and we didn't do it. It would be wrong to say that there was an unusual number of men there, far from it.
The Met Police were criticised after male officers were seen arresting female protesters at the event. Dick says she understands the images looked very powerful to people, but it was proportionate to the police's public order resources. An official report from an independent watchdog backed the police's handling of the event and found no evidence of heavy-handedness. But it criticised the force's tone-deaf response to criticism of the way it dealt with protesters, saying the Met should have taken a more conciliatory approach.
A 9-year-old boy has died after apparently being struck by lightning on a football field in Blackpool. The boy was taken to hospital but died a short time later. Emergency services were called to the training field at 5 p.m. on Tuesday. Police say inquiries are ongoing, but they believe the boy was struck by lightning. Deaths and injuries from lightning strikes in the UK are rare. In the average year, around 50 people are struck by lightning and 2 killed. And in other news, Britain will invest £22 million to help vulnerable countries tackle cyber threats originating from China, Russia and other actors. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab made that announcement today.
Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab warns that hostile state actors and criminal gangs are using technology to undermine democracy. He was addressing an online security conference on Wednesday. Raab said it is important to broaden the group of like-minded countries in tackling the cyber threat. He said the UK government will invest £22 million to help vulnerable countries in Africa and the Indo-Pacific build up their cyber defences. The UK will also work with Interpol to set up a new cyber operations hub in Africa to support joint operations against cybercrime.
The UK economy began to perk up in March, just before many lockdown measures were lifted. That's according to the latest official statistics. Overall, the economy shrank by 1.5% in the first 3 months of this year during lockdown. But in March, it grew by 2.1%. That's the fastest growth since last August. The growth was boosted by the reopening of schools and strong online retail spending. The economy is still 8.7% smaller than before the pandemic. Chancellor Rishi Sunak described the figures as a promising sign of things to come. And in other news, the Council of Europe warns of threats to individual freedoms, human rights, and the rule of law across the continent. A new report finds that some governments misused pandemic restrictions to centralize power.
Europe's leading human rights body warns that the threat to personal freedoms have worsened during the pandemic. In its annual report, the Council of Europe said some European governments are using health restrictions as a pretext to expand their power. The report says, individuals' rights and liberty have been curtailed in ways that would be unacceptable in normal times. The danger is that our democratic culture will not fully recover. In several countries, safeguards for the judiciary and other institutions were already under threat. Now they had been further eroded. The report chides Turkey, Moldova, Hungary and Russia for practices that include intimidation and arbitrary detention of government critics, or changes to the judiciary that was seen as threat to its independence. Power was also concentrated and centralized in government hands as restrictions meant to fight the pandemic were misused or kept for too long. The report states, COVID-related restrictions and measures must not only be necessary and proportionate, but also limited in duration. It also noted that elections were postponed in many countries or conducted in a way in which observation was almost impossible to carry out. Based in Strasbourg, France, the Council of Europe was created after World War II to protect human and democratic rights. It's not an EU body, and its 47 members now include Russia and countries of Caucasus region. The Secretary-General of the Council of Europe said, "Our member states now face a choice. They can continue to permit or facilitate this democratic backsliding, or they can work together to reverse this trend."
Government plans to ban junk food advertising online and on TV before 9 p.m. have sparked a backlash from an already reeling hospitality sector.
Restaurants, cafes and bakeries face threats to their social media after ministers banned junk food from being advertised online. Prime Minister Boris Johnson also plans to fight obesity in the UK by banning junk food adverts from TV before 9 p.m. The plan sparked a backlash from the hospitality and advertising sectors. A Federation of Small Businesses spokesman says if a local chip shop has images of cotton chips censored online, then we're clearly straying into the absurd. He says this comes as the food and drink sector is working flat out to get back on their feet as COVID restrictions ease. The Adam Smith Institute says the ban will make it illegal to advertise online for British favourites like fish and chips, Cornish pasties and a full English breakfast. They say the government's own impact assessment says it will reduce children's consumption by less than 3 calories per day. The Institute says this will have practically no impact on obesity, but will put thousands of jobs at risk.
London Fire Brigade warns teenagers are getting stuck in toddler swings across London as part of an unusual TikTok craze. It says it has responded to 21 instances of people trapped in swings this year, all links to the challenge on the video sharing app. 12 instances took place in the past month. The bizarre trend sees teenagers attempt to force themselves into the swing's metal frames, with their friends filming the process. Firefighters were called to the northwest London on Saturday to help a 14-year-old girl stuck in a swing. They had to dismantle the swing and expand it around the girl so they could free her. Fire services across the UK are urging teenagers to think twice before taking part in the challenge and wasting firefighters' time. A policeman who was poisoned during the Salisbury nerve agent attack is suing his own force. The case was filed in the High Court against the Chief Constable of Wiltshire Police earlier this month.
Detective Sergeant Nick Bailey was the first officer to enter Sergei Skripal's home in Salisbury after the Russian double agent was poisoned. The policeman then fell seriously ill after being poisoned himself. Now Bailey is suing Wiltshire Police. Bailey had been a policeman for 18 years. A legal representative said the incident 3 years ago forced him to leave the job he loved. The personal injury claim is filed under accidents at work. It comes after Bailey's wife tweeted last December that he was still fighting for part of his pension. Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia survived contact with the nerve agent, but Dawn Sturgis was killed after she came into contact with the perfume bottle used in the attack. 2 Russian nationals are accused of trying to murder Skripal by smearing Novichok on his door handle. They were caught on CCTV in Salisbury the day before the attack. The government says they're Russian military intelligence.
Popular grab-and-go cafe Pret A Manger will start opening stores in Tesco supermarkets. It's after its city centre outlets suffered heavy losses during the pandemic. The coffee and sandwich chain said it will open the first shop in June at the Tesco's in Kensington. It will open a further 3 stores in supermarkets later in the summer. It's part of Pret's plan to recover from the impact of the pandemic. Last year, the British chain announced more than 3,000 job cuts after sales were badly hit by the lockdown. Still to come, almost 90% of iPhone users worldwide have blocked apps from tracking their online activities. Find out more when we return.